March 17th, 1944. Outside Anzio, Italy. Carlo Moretti lies flat in a drainage ditch, 80 meters from the German artillery position, watching the gun crew service their 15-centimeter SFH-18 howitzer. The weapon is enormous. A field gun capable of throwing 43-kilogram shells 13 kilometers. For the past 6 days, this battery, 4 howitzers positioned in a stone farmhouse courtyard, has been systematically destroying the Allied beachhead at Anzio. Every 4 minutes, the guns fire. The shells arc over the defensive lines and impact somewhere in the crowded beachhead where 36,000 American and British soldiers are pinned down, unable to advance, unable to retreat, dying in increments as German artillery tears their positions apart. Carlo counts the gun crew, 11 men. They move with practiced efficiency. Load, aim, fire, reload. The howitzer recoils. The crew swabs the barrel, loads the next shell, adjusts elevation, fires again. The rhythm is mechanical, precise, relentless. Behind the gun position, ammunition is stacked in wooden crates. At least 200 rounds visible, probably more in the farmhouse basement. The Germans have supplies. They have position. They have clear fields of fire across the entire beachhead. They're untouchable. Except they're not untouchable. They just think they are. Carlo slides backward through the ditch, moving carefully, keeping below the sight line. His pack contains tools that would look absurd in a combat zone if anyone from Allied command could see them. No explosives, no weapons, just the contents of a locksmith's workshop. Files, springs, gears, clock components, wire, and a dozen small brass mechanisms that Carlo spent the last 3 months fabricating in a basement workshop in Naples. The plan is insane. Allied command rejected it twice. Brigadier General William Darby, commanding the Ranger forces at Anzio, read Carlo's proposal and called it the stupidest idea submitted during the entire Italian campaign. Artillery positions, Darby explained with barely concealed contempt, are eliminated by counter-battery fire, airstrikes, or infantry assault. Not by clocks. But counter-battery fire isn't working. The German guns are positioned behind thick stone walls. Allied artillery can see the muzzle flashes, can calculate firing positions, can drop shells into the general area. But the stone farmhouse absorbs the impacts. The Germans lose maybe 1 man per week to counter-battery fire. Not enough to matter. Airstrikes aren't working. The battery is protected by flak guns. Allied aircraft, attempting to bomb the position, face withering anti-aircraft fire. 2 P-47s were shot down last week, trying to suppress this single battery. The cost-benefit ratio is unacceptable. Infantry assault isn't working. The approaches to the farmhouse are open ground. 400 meters of muddy fields with 0 cover. German machine gun positions cover every approach. The Rangers tried a night assault on March 12th. 18 men died in the first 30 seconds. The rest retreated. Nobody's trying that again. So the German battery sits in its stone fortress and kills Allied soldiers 4 rounds per minute. 16 rounds from the 4-gun battery, 960 rounds per day, and there's absolutely nothing anyone can do about it. Except Carlo Moretti, 47-year-old locksmith from Naples, has a different idea. He's not going to destroy the guns. He's not going to kill the crew. He's going to make the guns destroy themselves, silently, invisibly, using nothing but clock mechanisms and patience. What Carlo understands, what nobody in Allied command grasps, is that artillery isn't just about the gun. It's about timing, precision, synchronization. And all of those things can be sabotaged if you know where to place a mechanism that introduces slight, progressive, undetectable delays into the firing sequence. He's going to turn the German battery's own efficiency against them. He's going to install time delay triggers that cause catastrophic firing sequences. And he's going to do it using skills he learned fixing grandfather clocks in his family's shop on Via Toledo. The howitzer SFH-18 is German engineering at its finest. Entering service in 1933, it represents state-of-the-art field artillery. Range 13,325 meters. Shell weight 43.5 kilograms. Rate of fire 4 rounds per minute with a trained crew. The weapon is reliable, accurate, devastating. German artillery crews trust it absolutely. The firing sequence is standardized, drilled into every crew until they can execute it unconsciously. First, the breech is opened, and the barrel swabbed to remove residue from the previous shot. Second, the shell is loaded into the breech, followed by the propellant charge. Third, the breech is closed and locked. Fourth, the gun is aimed using elevation and traverse controls. Fifth, the primer is inserted into the breech mechanism. Sixth, the lanyard is pulled, striking the primer, igniting the propellant, firing the shell. The entire sequence takes 15 seconds with an experienced crew. It's so routine that crew members perform their roles without conscious thought. That's the vulnerability. The breech mechanism, the critical component that seals the rear of the barrel, operates on a simple principle. When closed, it creates a gas-tight seal. When the gun fires, all explosive force is directed forward, propelling the shell. If the breech doesn't seal properly, if there's even a millimeter gap, gas escapes backward when the gun fires. The explosion that should propel the shell instead vents into the breech mechanism, then into the crew area. The breech closing mechanism uses a threaded screw design. Turn the handle, the breech plug rotates into position. Locking threads engage, the seal is complete. The system is fail-safe. It's mechanically impossible to fire the gun with the breech improperly closed, because the firing pin won't align unless the breech is fully locked. Except Carlo is going to modify that system. He's going to install a mechanism that allows the breech to appear fully closed while actually leaving a 2 millimeter gap. The gap will be invisible to the gun crew. They'll close the breech, see the locking indicator, show proper engagement, insert the primer, pull the lanyard. The gun will fire, and 2 millimeters will be enough to vent high-pressure propellant gas directly into the breech area, killing everyone within 3 meters. The mechanism is a clock trigger. Carlo fabricated 12 of them, one for each gun in the German batteries around Anzio, assuming he lives long enough to install them all. Each trigger is a small brass device, 4 centimeters long, 1 centimeter diameter, containing a wound spring, an escapement mechanism borrowed from pocket watch design, and a cam that rotates slowly over approximately 30 hours. The trigger installs inside the breech locking mechanism, hidden in a maintenance access port that artillery crews almost never open because it's not part of the standard firing procedure. Once installed, the mechanism does nothing for 30 hours. The gun functions normally. The crew has no idea anything is wrong. But after 30 hours, the wound spring reaches full extension. The escapement releases. The cam rotates one final time and physically prevents the breech locking threads from fully engaging. The next time the crew closes the breech, it will appear locked, but it won't be. Not completely. There will be a 2 millimeter gap. The next time they fire, the gun will kill them. Carlo perfected the design over 3 months of testing using a captured German artillery piece at the Allied training range near Naples. He installed his clock trigger, waited 30 hours, test-fired the gun with a remote lanyard from 50 meters away. The breech failure was catastrophic. The entire breech mechanism blew backward, propelled by gas pressure that should have been pushing the shell forward. Anyone standing behind the gun would have been killed instantly. Allied ordnance officers watched the test and were horrified. General Darby was summoned. He watched Carlo install another trigger, waited through the 30-hour delay, watched the second catastrophic failure. Then he asked the obvious question: how do you install this without getting caught? I was a locksmith for 30 years, Carlo said quietly. I can open any lock the Germans have. I can access any mechanism. And I can do it silently, in under 3 minutes. You want to sneak into German artillery positions and install clock triggers in their guns. Yes, sir. That's suicide. Probably. But right now, those guns are killing us, and we can't stop them. This might work. Darby studied Carlo for a long moment. The man was 47 years old, thin, wearing a civilian coat too large for his frame. He looked like somebody's grandfather, not a saboteur. Why are you volunteering for this? Carlo reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph. A woman and 2 children, maybe 8 and 10 years old. My wife and my daughters. They were killed when the Germans shelled Naples in September. I was at my shop. They were at the market. A shell landed directly on them. There was nothing left to bury. He put the photograph away. I'm not a soldier. I can't shoot a rifle. I can't throw a grenade. But I can do this. I can make German guns kill German soldiers instead of killing my people. Darby approved the operation. March 15th, 1944. Carlo received final authorization and equipment. The Rangers provided him with dark clothing, a suppressed pistol he didn't know how to use, a combat knife he hoped he'd never need, maps of German artillery positions, and transport to within 2 kilometers of the target area. The rest is on you, the Ranger lieutenant told him. We can't provide support. If you're caught, we can't extract you. You understand that? I understand. You don't have to do this. Nobody would blame you for backing out. Yes, they would. I would. Carlo spent the next 40 hours observing the target battery. The 4 howitzers were positioned in a rough square inside the farmhouse courtyard. Stone walls on 3 sides provided protection from counter-battery fire. The 4th side faced south, open to allow the guns to fire toward the beachhead. The German gun crews worked in shifts, 6 men per gun during firing operations. Reduced crew overnight when the battery was inactive. The Germans didn't fire at night. They didn't need to. Daytime harassment fire was sufficient to keep the Allies pinned down. Security was surprisingly lax. The Germans knew the battery was untouchable. They knew Allied infantry couldn't approach without being massacred. They posted sentries, but the sentries were watching for large-scale attacks, not for a single man crawling through drainage ditches. Carlo identified his entry point. A gap in the stone wall on the eastern side, partially collapsed from a near miss by Allied counter-battery fire 3 weeks ago. The gap was small, maybe 50 centimeters wide, obscured by debris. The Germans hadn't bothered repairing it because it didn't compromise the position's defensive strength. But it was large enough for Carlo to squeeze through. March 17th, 02:30 hours. The battery is quiet. The guns were serviced at 2200 hours, then covered with tarps. The crews are sleeping in the farmhouse. 2 sentries are posted, one watching the southern approach, one making periodic rounds of the courtyard. Carlo approaches from the east, moving through the drainage ditch he's been using for observation. He's wearing dark clothing, his face blackened with mud. His pack contains his tools and 4 clock triggers. He plans to install 1 trigger per gun tonight. 4 guns, 4 triggers, 4 future catastrophic failures. He reaches the collapsed section of wall at 02:47 hours. The sentry is on the far side of the courtyard, 60 meters away, facing south. Carlo waits until the man lights a cigarette, the brief flare of the match destroying his night vision, then squeezes through the gap. He's inside the German artillery position. The first howitzer is 8 meters away, covered with a canvas tarp. Carlo moves in absolute silence, a skill developed over 30 years of locksmithing. When you're picking a lock on someone's front door at night because they've locked themselves out and don't want to wake their family, you learn to move without sound. He lifts the tarp carefully, slides underneath, closes it behind him. Now he's in complete darkness beneath the canvas, crouched next to 6 tons of German steel. He allows his eyes to adjust, then pulls a small hooded flashlight from his pack. The beam is narrow, barely visible beyond the tarp. He locates the breech mechanism, the massive threaded plug that seals the barrel's rear. The breech has a maintenance access port on the left side, secured with 4 hex bolts. Standard German engineering. The bolts require a 10mm wrench. Carlo has one. He carefully removes all 4 bolts, places them in his pocket where they won't roll away, lifts the access cover. Inside is the breech locking mechanism, a complex assembly of gears, cams, and springs that control the breech plug's rotation and ensure proper sealing. There's a cavity next to the primary locking gear, designed to house a cleaning kit. The Germans never install the cleaning kit in field conditions. The cavity is empty. Perfect. Carlo removes one of his clock triggers from the pack. The device is precisely machined, brass components polished to reduce friction. He wound the mainspring before leaving the Allied lines. The escapement is ticking quietly, advancing the cam 1 tooth every 6 minutes. In approximately 30 hours, the cam will reach its final position. He installs the trigger in the empty cavity, using 2 small set screws to secure it. The trigger's actuating arm aligns with the breech locking gear. Right now, the arm is retracted. The breech will function normally. But when the escapement releases, the arm will extend 2 millimeters, physically blocking the locking gear from achieving full engagement. Installation takes 4 minutes. Carlo replaces the access cover, reinstalls the 4 hex bolts, torques them to proper tightness. He runs his fingers over the bolt heads, checking that they're flush, that nothing looks disturbed. Satisfied, he slides out from under the tarp, lowers it carefully back into position. The sentry is still on the far side of the courtyard, now sitting on an ammunition crate, smoking. Carlo moves to the second howitzer, lifts the tarp, slides underneath, locates the breech mechanism, removes the access cover, installs the second trigger. 5 minutes this time. He's getting faster. The third howitzer is positioned near the farmhouse wall. Carlo has to approach from an awkward angle to avoid the sentry's line of sight. He waits for the man to turn away, then moves quickly, slides under the tarp. This breech mechanism has slightly different bolt placement. He has to remove 5 bolts instead of 4. Installation takes 6 minutes. As Carlo is replacing the access cover, he hears voices. German voices, close, moving toward the courtyard. He freezes. 2 German soldiers emerge from the farmhouse, talking quietly. They're not sentries. They're gun crew, probably unable to sleep. coming outside for a cigarette. They walk directly toward the third howitzer, the one Carlo is hiding beneath. Carlo slides the access cover back into position, his fingers working soundlessly to thread the bolts. He gets 3 bolts started before the footsteps stop, less than 2 meters away. Through the gap between the tarp and the ground, he can see their boots. "Telling you, the breech temperature's been running hot on number 3, one soldier says in German. "I want to check it before morning firing." "It's fine. You're paranoid." 2 minutes. "I just want to look." Carlo's hand moves to the combat knife, strapped to his leg. He's never killed anyone. He's not sure he can. But if that tarp lifts, if they see him, he'll have to try. His fingers close around the knife handle. The first soldier takes a step toward the tarp. His hand reaches for the canvas edge. Then a shout from across the courtyard. "Richter! Bauer! Get over here!" The sentry, calling from the southern wall. "What is it?" "I need help moving ammunition crates. The Oberleutnant wants them repositioned before dawn." Richter, the soldier about to lift the tarp, hesitates. His hand is 30 centimeters from Carlo's hiding place. "The gun can wait," Bauer says. "Come on." Richter's hand drops. The 2 soldiers walk away toward the sentry. Carlo exhales slowly, releases the knife, picks up his wrench. His hands are shaking now, the first time tonight. He forces them steady, finishes installing the remaining bolts, checks them twice, slides out from under the tarp. The 4th howitzer is positioned near the collapsed wall section, his exit point. Carlo approaches it, slides beneath the canvas, and finds a problem. This breech mechanism is different. Newer model, different access port configuration. The hex bolts are recessed deeper, requiring a socket wrench instead of an open-end wrench. Carlo doesn't have a socket wrench. He stares at the bolts, mind racing. He could try to fabricate something, use his files to modify one of his tools. That would take 20 minutes. Too long. Dawn is 3 hours away. He needs to be gone before the gun crews wake. Or he could skip this gun, install only 3 triggers instead of 4. 3 catastrophic breech failures out of 4 guns. That would still cripple the battery. Carlo reaches for his pack, ready to retreat, then stops. He's a locksmith. He spent 30 years opening things that weren't designed to be opened. He's picked locks, defeated security mechanisms, accessed sealed compartments, using improvised tools. This is just another lock. He examines the recessed bolt heads. They're 10 millimeters, same as the others, just set 8 millimeters deeper in the access port. He can't get a wrench on them, but maybe he doesn't need to. Carlo pulls out a file, a small one designed for detailed work. He wraps cloth around one end to create a handle, then inserts the file's tang into one of the bolt heads at an angle. The tang is roughly hexagonal in cross-section, close enough to fit the bolt head. He applies pressure, rotating carefully. The bolt moves. 1/4 turn. He repositions the file, turns again. Another 1/4 turn. It takes 9 minutes to remove the first bolt, 8 minutes for the second, 7 for the third and fourth, as he refines his technique. The access cover comes free. Inside, the breech mechanism is identical to the others despite the different external housing. The clock trigger installs normally. Carlo secures it, replaces the cover, uses the file and cloth tool to reinstall all 4 bolts. Total time under the 4th howitzer's tarp, 43 minutes. Carlo slides out, lowers the canvas, and moves toward the collapsed wall section. The sentry and the 2 gun crew members are still working on the far side of the courtyard, repositioning ammunition crates. They're not watching the eastern wall. Carlo squeezes through the gap at 0419 hours, slides into the drainage ditch, and begins the long crawl back toward Allied lines. Behind him, 4 German howitzers sit silent in the darkness. Inside each breech mechanism, a clock trigger ticks quietly, counting down the hours. March 17th, 0630 hours. Carlo reaches the Allied forward positions, exhausted, mud-covered, hands cramping from the tension of maintaining absolute silence for nearly 2 hours. The Ranger checkpoint almost shoots him before he identifies himself. Brigadier General Darby is waiting at the command post. Well? 4 triggers installed. All 4 guns. No complications? Some. Nothing I couldn't handle. Darby studies him. When do they activate? I wound the springs at 2100 hours yesterday before I left. Installation took approximately 3 hours. The triggers will activate 30 hours after winding, which means, Carlo checks his watch, 0300 hours tomorrow morning. The first time the Germans fire those guns after 0300, the breeches will fail. And you're certain the failures will be catastrophic? I tested the mechanism 12 times. Every test produced complete breech separation. The gas pressure is enormous, over 3,000 bar. When it vents backward instead of forward, anyone within 3 meters dies. Darby nods slowly. German artillery typically begins firing at 0600 hours. Morning harassment. If your triggers work, we'll know by 0615. If they work, General, that battery won't fire more than 4 rounds total, 1 from each gun. Then the crews will be dead or incapacitated. And if the triggers are discovered before activation, then the Germans will know someone accessed their guns, and they'll inspect every artillery piece they have. We won't get a second chance. Can they trace it back to you? The triggers have no markings. The design is unique. Nothing in any military manual. They might eventually figure out the principle, but not soon enough to matter. Darby walks to the command post window, looking east toward the German lines. In the distance, barely visible in the morning light, the stone farmhouse that houses the battery. 6 days, Darby says quietly. That battery has been killing my men for 6 days. 14 dead yesterday. 9 the day before. We've tried everything except a full-scale assault. And I won't authorize that because the casualties would be catastrophic. He turns back to Carlo. If this works, if those guns are silenced, you'll have saved more American lives than any single action in this entire beachhead. If it doesn't work, you risked your life for nothing. It'll work, General. You sound certain. I am certain. I've been fixing clocks since I was 12 years old. I know how mechanisms fail. I know how to make them fail at exactly the right moment. Carlo doesn't sleep that day. He can't. He lies in his assigned bunk in the Ranger barracks, staring at the ceiling, counting hours. The clock triggers are ticking. The escapements are advancing. The cams are rotating 1 tooth every 6 minutes. By 1800 hours, the triggers have been active for 17 hours. 13 hours remain. By 2400 hours, 7 hours remain. By 0300 hours, March 18th, the triggers activate. The escapements release. The cams rotate to their final positions. The actuating arms extend, blocking the breech locking gears. Carlo doesn't know this has happened. He only knows the time has arrived. The next time those guns fire, his work will either succeed catastrophically or fail completely. He gets out of bed, dresses, walks to the command post. Darby is already there, along with his staff officers. They're all awake, all watching the clock. Couldn't sleep either? Darby asks. No, sir. German artillery usually begins at 0600, 2 hours. They wait. March 18th, 0600 hours. The sky is gray, overcast, typical Italian spring weather. From the Allied positions, Carlo can just barely see the German battery through binoculars. The gun crews are uncovering the howitzers, beginning their morning routine. 0607 hours. The first shell fires. The distinctive boom of the 15-centimeter howitzer, a sound Carlo has heard every day for weeks. The shell arcs toward the beachhead, impacts somewhere near the harbor. The gun crew swabs the barrel, begins loading the second round. That was gun number 1, an artillery spotter reports. Normal operation. Carlo's chest tightens. Did his trigger fail? Did the clock mechanism malfunction? 0609 hours. Gun number 2 fires. Another boom, another shell arcing toward the beachhead. Number 2, normal operation, the spotter says. Darby glances at Carlo. You said... Wait, Carlo interrupts. The triggers were installed in a specific sequence. Gun 3 was the third I modified, if the timing was slightly different. 0611 hours. Gun number 3 loads, aims. The gun captain pulls the lanyard. The explosion is different. Not the normal boom of a shell being propelled from the barrel. A sharper, louder crack, followed immediately by screaming. Through the binoculars, Carlo sees the breech mechanism of gun 3 separate from the barrel. The massive steel plug, weighing over 100 kilograms, launches backward, propelled by gas pressure that should have been pushing the shell forward. The breech plug hits the gun captain directly, killing him instantly, then continues backward, striking 2 more crew members. The shell, still in the barrel, cooks off from the heat. It doesn't have enough pressure to launch properly. Instead, it detonates partway down the barrel, splitting the tube like a peeled banana. Gun number 3 is destroyed. 3 crew members are dead. 2 more are screaming, injured by shrapnel and burning propellant. The German battery erupts in chaos. Crew members from the other guns run toward the destroyed howitzer. Officers shout orders. Someone is calling for medics. 0613 hours. In the confusion, gun number 1's crew attempts to fire their second round. They've already loaded, already aimed. The gun captain, focused on the disaster unfolding 15 meters away, pulls the lanyard without thinking. Gun number 1's breech fails identically. The breech plug launches backward. The barrel splits. 3 more Germans die. Now the battery is in complete panic. Officers are screaming at the remaining gun crews to stop. Don't fire. Don't touch the guns. But gun number 4's crew has already loaded their second round. They're in the middle of their firing sequence when the orders reach them. The gun captain hesitates, hand on the lanyard. An officer runs toward him, shouting, "Stop! Don't fire. The breeches are..." Too late. The gun captain, trained by months of repetition to complete the sequence, pulls the lanyard reflexively. Gun number 4 explodes. Same catastrophic failure. Same lethal result. 3 guns destroyed in 4 minutes. 9 German soldiers dead. 6 more wounded seriously enough that they'll never serve again. Only gun number 2 remains operational, and its crew is standing 20 meters away from it, refusing to approach. The German battery has ceased operations. Allied observers watch through binoculars, stunned. The artillery spotter turns to Darby. "Sir, I've never seen anything like that. 3 catastrophic breech failures simultaneously." "Not simultaneously," Darby says quietly. "Sequentially. Exactly as designed." He looks at Carlo. "Congratulations. You just killed a German artillery battery with clock parts. The implications ripple outward faster than anyone anticipates. By 0700 hours, German Artillery Command receives reports of the catastrophic failures at Anzio. By 0730, similar reports arrive from two other batteries in the Italian theater. Both batteries experienced identical failures: guns exploding, breeches separating, crews killed. By 900, German artillery operations across the entire Italian front are suspended pending investigation. Oberst Heinrich Brauer, Wehrmacht Chief of Artillery for Army Group C, orders immediate inspection of every artillery piece under his command. Over 300 guns. Every breech mechanism must be disassembled, examined for defects, and certified safe before firing resumes. The inspection reveals Carlo's triggers in 11 additional guns. The devices are discovered before activation, but the damage is done. German Artillery Command now knows their guns have been sabotaged. They know the sabotage is sophisticated, time-delayed, almost undetectable. They know they can't trust their weapons. The inspection process takes 6 days. 6 days during which German artillery in Italy fires at less than 20% normal capacity. 6 days during which Allied forces at Anzio finally break out of the beachhead, advancing against reduced opposition. By March 24, 1944, Allied casualties from German artillery have dropped by 73%. The breakout from Anzio, originally projected to cost 2,000 casualties, costs 340. German after-action reports attribute the reduced defensive effectiveness to systematic sabotage of artillery systems by unknown partisan elements utilizing sophisticated time delay mechanisms. They never identify Carlo Moretti. The Germans eventually figure out the clock trigger principle. Wehrmacht engineers examine the captured devices, reverse engineer the design, issue warnings to all artillery units. But by then, Allied forces are advancing up the Italian peninsula. The tactical moment has passed. What the Germans never understand is that the clock triggers weren't really about the mechanisms themselves. They were about psychology, about destroying confidence in the weapons that German crews depended on absolutely. After March 18th, German artillery crews in Italy fire their guns differently. They stand farther back. They check the breech obsessively before every shot. They hesitate at exactly the wrong moments. The efficiency drops, the rate of fire decreases, the psychological impact of fighting with weapons you don't trust undermines effectiveness more than the actual sabotage. Carlo installs 29 more triggers over the next 7 weeks, working alone, moving from battery to battery across the Italian front. Allied intelligence provides him with target locations. Rangers provide insertion support. He does the rest himself, crawling through German lines, accessing artillery positions, installing his clock mechanisms in under 3 minutes per gun. 17 of the triggers activate before discovery. 17 catastrophic failures. 41 German artillery crew members killed. Another 30 wounded. 17 guns destroyed or damaged beyond field repair. But the real damage is the operational disruption. Every time a trigger activates, German Artillery Command orders another comprehensive inspection. Every inspection means days of reduced fire support. Days when Allied forces can maneuver without being subjected to the systematic artillery bombardment that has characterized the Italian campaign. By May 1944, German artillery effectiveness in Italy has degraded to the point where Wehrmacht commanders are requesting emergency reinforcements just to maintain defensive positions. Those reinforcements come from France, from Normandy, from the Atlantic wall defenses that will face the Allied invasion on D-Day. Carlo Moretti doesn't know his clock triggers are indirectly weakening the German response to D-Day. He doesn't know that 3 panzer battalions, originally assigned to Normandy, are being diverted to Italy to compensate for the artillery losses. He doesn't know Wehrmacht High Command is pulling resources from France because Italian front commanders are screaming about systematic sabotage, destroying their fire support capability. He only knows that every trigger he installs might kill the men who killed his family. May 11th, 1944. Carlo is crouched in darkness outside a German artillery position near Cassino. This battery is different from the others. It's positioned inside the ruins of a medieval monastery, stone walls 2 meters thick, approach routes covered by machine gun positions and minefields. The battery commander is paranoid about sabotage, runs security patrols every 20 minutes, inspects the guns personally 3 times daily. Carlo has been observing for 4 days. He's identified the patrol patterns, the guard rotations, the inspection schedules. There's a 17-minute window between 0:2300 and 02:47 hours when the battery is minimally guarded. That's his only chance. He's carrying 4 triggers. The battery has 6 guns, but he'll only have time to access 4 before the patrols return. At 02:31 hours, he moves. The approach takes 8 minutes, crawling through rubble, avoiding sight lines, timing his movement to the sentry's rotation. He reaches the first gun at 02:39 hours. 8 minutes remaining. The breech mechanism access cover has been modified. Someone welded a steel plate over it, probably as a sabotage prevention measure. Carlo pulls out a small hacksaw, begins cutting through the weld. The sound is quiet but not silent. Metal on metal. A soft scraping that seems impossibly loud in the darkness. 4 minutes to cut through the weld. 4 minutes remaining. He removes the access cover, installs the trigger. In 2 minutes, replaces the cover. He doesn't have time to re-weld it. The Germans will notice during their next inspection, but the trigger will activate in 30 hours. If the Germans discover it before then, Carlo's entire mission fails. 2 minutes remaining. He can reach 1 more gun or retreat safely. Not both. Carlo moves to the second gun, begins cutting through the welded plate. He's halfway through when he hears footsteps. The patrol, returning 3 minutes early. He freezes, hacksaw blade still pressed against metal. The footsteps are close, maybe 15 meters away, moving along the exterior wall of the monastery. 2 men, talking quietly in German. If they enter the gun emplacement, if they see him, Carlo is dead. He's trapped inside the monastery ruins. No escape route. No way to fight through 2 armed soldiers. His hand moves to the suppressed pistol the Rangers gave him. He still doesn't know how to use it properly. He's fired it twice at the training range, hit nothing both times. But if the soldiers discover him, he'll have to try. The footsteps pass by without stopping, and Carlo Moretti, locksmith from Naples, finishes installing his second trigger at 02:49 hours, slips back through the ruins into darkness, carrying with him the knowledge that sometimes the most devastating weapons aren't forged in factories, but crafted in workshops by grieving men who understand that precision, patience, and 30 hours can turn an army's strength into its own destruction.